Scribbled notes, scribbled notes when I wrote these quotes. If I offend, pardon me, there's more of me to grow. Creative in my process, enjoy the show. The will is different when you recognize the different strokes. Different folks, same goals, we all want the most. So when we reach the top, we can enjoy the toast. The type of bread we get is fresh about the bakery. Told them don't play with me, with or without a degree. Don't question my intensity, bravery. Similar to agencies that want to see you fold. So just pray for me. Yeah, Einstein with my energy.
Welcome to the Scribbled Notes podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm doing well. It's a little bit chilly here in Colorado, so started trying to stay warm. How are you?
I cannot complain. I'm not in Colorado, so it's a little bit nicer out today in Connecticut. But why don't you introduce yourself for the listeners and people who might not know who you are?
Okay, perfect. So I am Bekah Berge, and I write young adult and new adult fantasy. And I've got 4 books out with another few on the way, a couple anthologies, which is going to be fun. And just kind of, you know, doing the thing. I don't know.
The writing, publishing thing.
Yeah.
So what made you want to, this is gonna be like a weird question, I'm gonna phrase it, but like what made you want to become a writer? What made you want to be published? What was that journey like for you?
Yeah. So I started officially writing books about 10 years ago. And then had a bit of a like pause on books. Because I ended up working at a magazine as a journalist in Los Angeles. And so I was doing that for a few years, and then I did some freelance for them, which helped me, I think, figure out how to write a good story, if that makes sense. Like before that, you know, I was kind of writing books, not very well, you know, it's kind of one of those things where the story just isn't quite centered, if you know what I mean. Like there's no like focus. So I think being a journalist helped me figure out how to tell a story very concisely, and like what the actual point of the story is. And so after I kind of stepped away from journalism, jumped back into books and then started publishing.
So that's like a really cool little story you have. And like how you got to this point, because I feel like there's so many different places people come from. Like for myself, I was like, I got my master's degree in counseling. And it was through that and like doing research and like learning more about the human mind and how people behave that then got me interested in like writing stories. And I've always been interested in fantasy, and it just like spiraled into me now like publishing fantasy books. But I think it's like really cool coming from like an editing space and like learning how to tell a story, like learning what are the elements that really need to be there to make it something interesting. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the whole thing right there, is figuring out how to tell a compelling story. And that, I think, definitely, I don't care how talented you are, it takes time to figure that out.
Does it happen overnight?
No, definitely not. You know, I think at least for me, in the beginning stages of writing books, I was in my early 20s and I like randomly decided to write a Russian spy novel, which is like so not my thing. But I like, just went for it, and it was awful and terrible, but learned a lot from that one.
As you should.
Yep.
So talking about stories, talking about how you come up with the narrative, what's it like for you making a story and trying to make it compelling and complete? I know for myself, it's this love-hate relationship. I always need the end of my story before I can write the middle. So I just have this I get obsessed with the ending, making sure that whatever the point is, I know I can get there. But what's it like for you? How do you tell your stories? How do you write your stories?
For me, it always begins with the characters. The character is where I begin. Whoop, sorry, my dog. um, Characters is where it begins for me, figuring out who they are. Why am I telling this story? The why for me is really important. I have to know, like, why is this important? Why is this interesting? Why should anyone want to read it? And then after that, the story itself begins to unfold surrounding the characters. And very similarly, I do need to know the ending before I begin, because I need to know, where this is going. Like, how am I going to get there? How do I get to that point?
Yeah. How do I get to this climax at the end? Like, where do we? I find myself doing something like that. Like, I love having compelling characters. I like having interesting characters. I wouldn't even say compelling, just interesting. And I feel like that's always been, or that is my favorite part of just writing and storytelling. Outside of world building, which I feel like a lot of writers, especially fantasy writers, it's like world building is the place to be. That process is always super fun, coming up with all the crazy ideas that can go through your head about the way a society works. I'm even right now, it's a side tangent. I'm like, I have two different lists going on. One is for this third book in my trilogy. So I have some ideas, some pieces that I'm putting in towards that. I'm like, all right, these are going to be cool concepts to include. And then another list is literally all of the rest of the book ideas I have that exist in the world. And I'm like, anytime I get any inspiration, the inspirations go on one of those two lists right now. And I think just as someone who's looking at storytelling and someone that might be struggling to figure out what story they want to tell, how do you do it? How do you figure out which story you want to tell? Which books do you want to publish, or which ones do you want to actually write? How do you do that?
I think a lot of it has to do with my mood at the time. Like, am I in the mood for something that's like really intense and very kind of wild and all over the place, which is kind of where Sedendum falls into, because that one is my new adult fantasy, and it's very kind of almost in a way like aggressive. It's almost like an aggressive story. Like, there are 7 characters, and they're all in this game that is designed by the god of death. And so the game is very intense, cutthroat. People die. It was like I was in the mood for that when I wrote it. I was in the mood to write something like just crazy and just, have as much fun as I could possibly have with it, which I did. I had lots of fun. And then my latest book, Needlework, is with a group of musicians. And so that one is a little bit more, heartfelt and heavy, and it has a bit of a romantic aspect to it, but both characters come from like, a lot of pain and a lot of sadness. And that's something I wrote when I was, very much in that place of just a little bit sad, a little bit down. And that's how that book came to be. And then, the short stories I'm doing right now are just very, very much on the whimsical side of things, trying to keep everything fairly lighthearted, sort of. I always lean toward like dark fantasy. So the stories are, I just go there. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
I also write dark fantasy, so I am very much in that camp. I'm like, I want to tell this amazing story of love and how this person achieved, but I don't know how to not do that with a bunch of pain. So those are like just the way I figure myself writing all the time. What have you been writing recently? What have you been up to? What have you been working on?
Yeah. So the second short story that I'm doing currently is kind of like my version of a fairy tale. Definitely more along the lines of like Grimm's brothers. Like there's that darkness, that kind of the ruthless kind of mythological characters, or not characters, creatures, part of it. But yeah, so it's a fairy tale that is two of the characters, the main characters that it follows, are the younger brother of like Prince Charming. So there's always that that focus on Prince Charming and Cinderella, but like, what if he had a younger brother and he was kind of an angsty, artsy type, that doesn't like to follow the rules, doesn't really enjoy, I suppose, being royal in a way. And the other character is this girl who has been sick since the day she was born. So she's got this like kind of reversal of a curse in a way. Not to give too much away, but she has essentially been cursed since she was born. And so she's been sick her whole life, and she's continuing to get worse and worse the older she gets. And so it follows their kind of journey into trying to find a cure for her, so that she doesn't die, because she's very close to that point in her life. And so it's fun because they enter this like very creepy forest, where like all the colors are flipped upside down, very Alice in Wonderland, and was inspired by this this painting that I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with the artist. She does open impressionism, and so it's all very like upside down colors, and I loved it. And so it kind of inspired this whole going into an enchanted forest that is all very confusing, but they're on their path to try and find a cure.
Oh, that sounds so much fun.
I hope so. Well, we'll see. It's kind of a mess right now, but first drafts are always a mess.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask about your first draft. I was gonna say, when you're writing your first draft, do you just like power through the whole thing? Do you stop chapter by chapter, reevaluate? What kind of writer are you?
Yeah. So I'm very much a plotter, and I must know what is going to happen at every point in the story. And I usually like to sort of power through the first draft. I do a little bit of editing along the way, just to make sure that the last chapter works in the newest chapter that I'm writing. And so yeah, it's a little bit of editing, but absolutely powering through. Like the first draft is not great. But yeah, what about you? And you're very much power through?
I am a power through. I will start the book from chapter 1. I have to write in chronological order, which also just it annoys me sometimes. But I write in chronological order, and I usually write one character at a time. So like I use multiple character perspectives, but I'm like, oh, we're just gonna follow this one person's plot line from start to finish. And then that's where and then from there it's like it usually changes a whole bunch of other stuff, because now I want to like write other people's storylines and have tie-ins and references and timelines and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm usually plotting out every single scene. I usually know I'm better now than I was before, but I know where they're at location wise and which characters will be in this scene. I felt like that was like a really good place to start, because for my first book, it was so much fun, because I was like, oh, you know what? They're gonna walk into this room, and because I have nothing established, no characters established, like these people will be here. Let's start making characters. And it felt like everywhere I went, or everywhere the character went, I was just making new people who were not a part of the plot like before. So it was very fun, but it really stressed me out, because I felt like every scene I was like just trying to figure out who would be there. Where now I'm like, okay, it's clear these people will be there because they are the little crew or the band, the group. They're doing it. So
Yeah.
it's changed a lot.
That's funny. Oh man. Yeah. I mean, with characters, especially if you're just focusing on one particular for a while, it it does end up changing like half the plot. You're like, what? Wait, I wasn't gonna go this way, but I guess now we're going that way.
Yeah, like now we have this, and like God forbid if you make a new cool character out of nowhere, because that just happens sometimes. You're like, oh, let's just have a random person that's just like ruins the whole thing. I had a random like servant maid that I created her, made her too funny. It was just like I made her comments too funny for her to disappear for the rest of the book. So then I was like, how can I add her back in? And now she's doing all types of crazy stuff that she wasn't supposed to be a part of. And she needs a wrap up for the final book of the trilogy. And I'm like, you were just a random thought that was not supposed to be this important.
Oh
But
yeah.
as it goes.
But isn't that crazy how that happens? Like it's supposed to be just like a tiny bit, but then you start to fall in love with that character. And so then they are like always around.
They're always around. They're always doing something. I think it's also really cool just talking about that, because it is fun to plot, but it's also fun to just create. And I think sometimes writers, I know some people I talked to online, they were talking about writer's block. And I was kind of telling them that some of the writer's block comes from trying so hard to write a good story versus just writing what you like, just what comes up. And sometimes that's the stuff that's most fun, like what just comes up when you're thinking and when you're writing, and what are your characters experiencing, who knocks on the door and who comes through that door. And I think that's that stuff has been what I've been talking to people mostly about, because I think that writer's block is really easy to overcome if you give yourself a little bit more fun and flexibility.
Absolutely. I think that's something that I try and remind myself of often, is like writing should be fun. Like this is fun and it's art, and just explore and have fun. And what happens, the characters. I mean, I remember with Sedendum, there's this like creepy little creature called a Boloko. And I decided that he was going to be like the little like soldier of death, because he works with the trickster god. And he's this wild, just crazy, ruthless character that shows up out of nowhere. And I just had a lot of fun with him, and I like started to fall in love with him. I was like, he's a terrible character, but I love him so much.
Yeah, it's like I love this character. I can't let him go.
Yeah.
it goes so far, and it's actually really funny because I think a lot of the fun pieces of writing isn't what we know, because like we can have a great idea what the storyline will be or plot line will be, and even plotters change course, but it's like you can have an idea of the ending, but it doesn't stop the rest of the story from being created and all these side characters from playing a role. And I think the fun piece, at least for me, is how do I connect the dots? Like how do I get them to that point at the end that they need to be at? And a lot of that comes from character motivations, and if they're always motivated to get to that point, they'll get there. And all the things that happen throughout it will just be a piece of their story. And I think that's been the fun for me. What's been fun for you when you're writing? What has been so fun? What keeps you writing?
Well, I think, as you're talking about character motivation, that's huge. And I think people are very like flawed in a way that, you have a lot of wiggle room to play around with. So I love morally gray characters. I love them. They're amazing. They're like my bread and butter. I just love them. And I try and have them in every book, because I feel like I can I can play around a lot more with a morally great character. And like, I know their motivation, the reader knows their motivation, but how we get to the end, or how we get to the climax of the story, or the meaning of the story is the juicy part, you know, like that's what you can just have a blast in.
Yeah. Before we continue, here's a message from this episode's sponsor, Workaholics. Workaholics is an American apparel company that specializes in fitness merchandise. They create clothing that gives you a comfortable feel even when the workout's tough. When your tank is on E, ask yourself, how hard you working? That defines them, but that's the question that also will help you become the best version of yourself. You can follow them at work_merch_ on Instagram. That's at work, WERK _merch_ on Instagram. Let's get back to the show.
So
Like, that's what it's about.
yes, exactly. Like I love the characters that may on the surface be kind of hard to root for, but then you begin to unravel them as you're reading, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I can relate to this. Like I would never tell anyone that I feel this way, but like I relate to that.
It's like,
So,
yes,
yeah.
yes. So you published quite a few books already. What have you learned through your publishing journeys, and what is different now than that first time around when you knew very little, most likely?
Yeah.
Like I did, very, very little.
Yes, same. I keep that first book around as like, look how far you've come.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I've learned, you know, how to the why of a story, you know, like why is the plot happening? And also character motivation, being really crystal clear with motivations, I think helps the reader like kind of connect or relate or get invested in the story if like they're able to understand why this character is doing what they're doing. So I think character motivations are huge. And I try and bring those to the front of the story fairly quickly, so that the reader kind of is engaged before we hit like the 50-page mark. Like I try and keep and get, you know, a good section of the plot going before we hit 50 pages, because then after those 50 pages, I just want to like out of here, you know, we're going, the plot is out of here.
It's moving.
So, yeah, exactly. You know, you get on the highway and you're just cruising. So that's how it feels. Or at least for me, when I'm writing it, that's how it feels. Is to try and get things going as quickly as possible, and in a way that is interesting. Because, you know, if I don't want to read it, why would someone else want to read it? You know, it's like I feel very much like learning from a reader's perspective when I read a book, you know, how a story gets a hold of me, and then trying to utilize those skills that other authors have done beautifully, and kind of be like, okay, so this is how you write a good story.
Yeah.
Learning
Every day. Yeah, like
Mhm.
that sense of progress, getting readers invested in either the character or the direction that the character is going to move in early on is super critical, because sometimes it could if it takes too long to really feel like there's a point or rhyme or reason, it's easy to kind of fall out of the story and say like, okay, there's like nothing for me to feel like I'm waiting for, I'm anticipating, or even like, okay, I can see this going somewhere. And I know with my second book, it like when you said that, it just made me think of one of the characters, Asher, based off his ending in in the prior book. He like he's supposed to be on a boat going somewhere, and it's like the most open you can make any character end as an author. Just going somewhere on a boat is where they left off in the first book. So when I opened up the second book, I was like, okay, we can have him going somewhere forever. We can like spend chapter after chapter describing his journey, his first journey on a boat. Yeah. Because like you could do that. Or I was like, I can just have something happen. And I just decided we spent a little bit of time early in the chapter, him getting his bearings, you kind of getting reminded of some things that happened. And then the action, like just this moment just hits. And once it hits, every person that read that chapter afterwards was like, I just had no clue what was going to happen from here. It was like, after they, like this whole thing happened, it's like, where do they go from here? And every step gets wilder and wilder and wilder as you get to go. And his like storyline was one of the most fun experiences I had writing, because it was just like, I knew the plot. I knew where he was going to end. And because we started so quickly, it just made it a crazy ride the whole way through. And it was really cool because I could balance with other characters in the book, but like his line was one everyone wanted to get back to, which gives readers the sense of movement that you kind of want.
Yeah, exactly. I think you can always tell when a writer was having a lot of fun with it because it's so fun to read. It's just like, you can't put it down. Like when people talk about, a page turner or a book that like, oh my gosh, I was up till 3 a.m. That's what you want.
Yeah, that's where it feels good.
Yeah.
So you published a lot and you've written a lot. What does your kind of release strategy look like when you're getting ready to launch a book?
So I've been learning as I've been going, because my first 2 books, I like didn't know how to market. I was like, what do you mean marketing? I don't want to do that. Definitely kind of like a slow burn tease, you tease the cover, then you've got the cover reveal. You tease a little bit more about the book and chapters and characters, and doing like mood boards or aesthetic boards with different characters, or even just the plot in general. And then I try and have my ARC group, my street team, give them all a copy with probably about like a month or so before, so that hopefully on release day you have some reviews coming in, which is good to kind of help build momentum. And then just essentially trying to get all your friends to help you promote.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a huge undertaking. That's why.
Exactly. And I have been on the other side of things with publishing, just working for a magazine and kind of seeing how that all works, and being a part of like a PR team, and you're just like, oh, okay. You have press releases and all sorts of stuff. And like, I totally think with indie publishing, what's really cool about it is you are in full creative control the entire time, which is great, because I have friends who are in traditional, and it's great. And, they have, some of them have had very, positive experiences with it, but you really don't have control over, pricing. Like if you want to do, a free, the book is free for X amount of days, or a 99-cent deal, like you don't usually have too much say in that. So with indie, you can do whatever you want. That book can be 99 cents, forever, or leading up to release day, or, however you want to do it. So that's what I really like. I like having control.
Yeah. And that control is something that is so underrated. Because it feels really good. It feels good to go through the process from start to finish, knowing that the product that you came up with and the thing that your story is in the packaging you want and with the cover that you like, in the places that you want, and then you have control over it from there. And I think some of that control is difficult, especially if you don't know what you want to do,
Mhm.
because just advertising is it's so much bigger than I think anyone is ever ready for, because it's such a pay to win place. But at the same time, there's so many ways to market and so many ways to get your book in front of people's eyes. And there are just countless tools and opportunities. What have been some of those things that have worked well for you, advertising wise?
Um, so Amazon ads is like hit and miss. It's one of those things where like I don't know that I love it, but I do know it has worked occasionally.
Mm.
Not the biggest fan of like Facebook or Instagram ads because I don't know they actually, well, for me they haven't worked. Maybe I just need them for longer, but it's just like gets kind of pricey.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I was just like, oh.
You want anyone to see your stuff?
Yeah, exactly. So I have become a big fan of giveaways, being a part of like Facebook takeover parties. Those are great. Newsletter swaps with people. So you know, they'll put your books in their newsletter and you'll put theirs in yours. That has actually worked pretty well. And then I know this is like not ideal, but I do give away a lot of free books.
Mm.
Like I I got on Book Funnel and I was doing giveaways left, right, and center. Trying to get people interested in one, and then hopefully they'd be interested to buy the others. And then I was very shocked when I was able to get my library to pick up my books.
Mm.
So now my books are at the library, which
That's
is
awesome.
great.
What?
Yeah, I was surprised. I didn't think they would, but they did. I was
That's
really
crazy. That's incredible.
It is a lot of advocating for yourself, though. I
Mm.
mean, that's something that like I have had to become really comfortable with because it's like so not something that I'm comfortable with. But being like, hey, I wrote these books and like maybe you'll like them.
Yeah, it's like you have to like learn to pitch yourself kind of, which is always such a weird thing. I think
Yeah.
pitching the book is also still weird to me. Like someone says, "What's your book about?" I'm like, I don't know, read the back.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to, I can explain it, but it's going to be not as in depth as it really is. There's just so many things. I think just being an author, you're kind of put out into the world, and you have to just realize that it's also this business that's associated with the writing. The writing can be so much fun, but then you have the editing and actually creating something and proofreading and making sure that the product is polished before it gets out to everyone else. There's all that piece that's still associated. So there's a lot that goes into it, that I think gets underplayed sometimes, because if you only talk about writing, then you almost never talk about publishing and how much of a tough task that is for independent publishers and self-published folks, because it's difficult. It's not a easy process, even though some people make it look super easy. They just have it down, but
They
I don't
do.
know.
They like do rapid release, and I'm just like, oh yeah.
I try to rapid release. I can imagine like writing the books that much and then just I can't even keep a track of the 2 books I have. So
Yeah, I know. And then like holding on to the whole series and making it, everything is edited and everything has a cover, and you're just like, okay, we're gonna do like one a month, and I'm like, I don't want to.
that just seems so hard. It does seem very hard. It seems hard for me to like hold back books when they're finished. That already seems hard enough, because after it's like done, all I want to do is publish it.
Yes,
But
exactly.
it's like you're waiting.
Yeah. Well, like there's so many steps that people don't know about with like, the writing the book, then the editing, beta readers, then your actual copy editor, and then proofreading. And then eventually, you usually do like 5 terrified extra reads before you actually, publish it.
Yep.
And then it's always fun when your ARC readers, your street team comes back and they're like, so I saw this plot hole. And you're like, no.
You're like, not a plot hole. Not the one thing that can't be there.
I know. Oh, but yeah. And then there's a finished product, and hopefully it's shiny and great. And, you just kind of put it out into the world and hope it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Market and all the things that follow. And there's a lot that goes into it. So what kind of advice do you have for somebody looking to self-publish a book based off of all your experience and the many stories you have written and published?
You make me sound so much cooler than I really am.
Hey, listen, all I can do is see what you've done. You've done a lot.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so advice. Don't come. I mean, this is, you hear all the time. Don't compare where you're at to where someone's at 5 years later. Like someone who has, over 100 reviews on their books, and, they've published like 10 novels, and you're just like, how do I get there? Don't compare yourself to that. Be kind to yourself. Like really give yourself some grace. Like you're just starting out. It's the beginning is always very hard because you just don't know what you're doing. Like you can ask everybody, but when you're still doing it, like in the process of getting it out there, and it's your first debut novel, like it's so hard. And so, be kind to yourself, make friends on Instagram, on TikTok, on whatever. Having friends, also be able to talk about your books or to make a post about your books is huge. I think, I try to do that a lot. I have like these little calling all authors posts that started, in like June as like a game, to myself. And then now it's like every month people are like, hey, I have this book coming out. Can you help me? And I'm like, sure.
Like, of course.
I'll do my best, because I know how crazy and overwhelming the very beginning is, or even just every book. I mean, it's like, how do you get your book out there? And so yeah, give yourself some grace, be kind to yourself, make friends, and yeah, just kind of roll with it, because it's going to be not necessarily smooth sailing. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think those are really solid points, because when you're first starting out, when you are first starting out, there's so much you don't know, and there's so much that you really can't know, because as much as like you can get advice and you get people's thoughts, there's so many things that just happen that you just couldn't foresee. Like I remember one of the things that happened to me that like I didn't even hear anyone talk about really, because I was trying to figure out how to publish an audiobook, is that like ACX they just publish it whenever. Like you can't choose the date. They're like, oh, anytime within the next 30 days. So I was just like,
yeah.
I was like, what do you mean? I have a release date. And you're just gonna publish it whenever? And they're like, yeah, it's whenever it gets done with quality control checks.
Mm-hmm.
So that like really changed some of the marketing stuff that I had planned, because I didn't know that. And I don't think that wouldn't be something necessarily that every single author is going to lead with when talking about audiobooks. So it's like sometimes information gets missed, and it worked out, because it always works out. Like no matter what, it always figures its way. And then the best piece of advice I've ever gotten is that your book doesn't just disappear after it's been up for a year. Like it lasts forever, so you can always talk about it, you can always promote it. It'll always be news to the reader the first time they get it. So that's always stuck with me. But yeah, what you're saying is like so accurate as far as like what to do if you're new trying to start.
Thank you. I hope so. I hope I'm like giving like decent advice. It's like, I know a little bit, but still learning. I mean, I remember the first time I uploaded to KDP and it was like all of these questions. And I was like, I don't know what to pick. How do I know? And, when you're uploading for your paperback and figuring out the formatting is a whole other thing.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. People have no idea. And then our book is up there and it's like $2.99 and you're like, you've no idea how, like, this should be like $2,000. Like, but yeah.
No, I completely feel that. That's nothing's ever been so true. Like, you, after all the work, you posted up for $2.99.
Yep. And there's like, hopefully a few sales a month.
Yeah. You're like, gosh, but it's so worth it. It's worth it every time. So that's the other piece. It is really worth it. What has been some of the best feedback you've gotten from readers?
Ooh, I always love when with Sedendum, I love when people tell me they didn't see the ending coming, because I feel like then I like master craft puzzler. Like, yes. And then with needlework, I love it when people feel like they can relate to it, or it feels something that they just enjoyed, and it was a nice, lovely story. I love when people tell me they enjoyed it. Like, that's really all I want, is I want readers to enjoy the story. I want them to feel like they've been immersed into a new world for a little while, and it's been a bit of a reprieve from life. And so, yeah, just if you enjoy it, that's all I want. It's just, yeah, simple.
Genuine joy. Reviews go such a long way for authors. So if you're listening, make sure you review any books that you're reading or just finished reading. Always important to help authors, but it's also really cool to hear like just what authors are looking for, what you're looking for. And I think being able to have someone enjoy your story, as small as it might seem to someone else, it's like that means the world. And when people can like write that and they say that, it like will stick with you. So it's always important to acknowledge the good things.
Yeah. And if you're reading a book and you've enjoyed it and you review it, which is always, important. Reviews are great. But even like, I love when people just send me a DM and it's like a really quick thing, like, oh, I just finished your book and I enjoyed it so much. And like, very simple. Like, it doesn't have to be like a big, long, essay of like why I liked your book. It's very simple. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. That is everything to me. Like, I feel like I did my job if people enjoy it,
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I felt that anytime someone reads the book and you're like, you finished, like, now we can. I always feel like I can talk to the person finally. Now we can actually talk. Like, now we can actually move on.
Yeah.
Now that you know the plot twist and all.
Yeah, exactly. Which characters did you like? What worked for you?
What worked? What didn't work? What are you thinking? Any ideas for what's coming up? Because I literally love asking people if they have like any types of any predictions. I love predictions.
Yeah.
Mostly because I know I know the endings, but I'm like, what are your predictions? Like, where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, exactly. It's so fun. And, that's part of the joy of being able to talk to readers, because we don't necessarily hold, especially now with COVID, but being able to hold like a reading or a signing at like a local bookstore or something, and being able to like connect with readers and be like, what did you enjoy? And thank you so much. So yeah, just the social media, I feel like allows for that connection to happen with a reader, and yeah, getting their thoughts. Like, what did you think? Where do you think this is going? Like you were saying, it's fun to hear that. It's great.
Yeah, those are some of the best things to hear. Where can people connect with you online? Where can they find you on social media? Where can they buy the books?
Yeah. So everything's on Amazon. Needleworks, Addendum, and the Shadow series. Books 1 and 2. I haven't finished the trilogy yet. Sorry, everyone. But Amazon, and then I have an Instagram, just Bekah Berge, and then TikTok, same thing. I'm not great at TikTok, so don't expect much. It's really bad.
setting the expectation now.
Oh yeah, just keep them really low. And then I have my website, crpsbookshelf.com, and I am hoping in the next 6 months or so to be able to have a possibly Etsy shop where you can buy a signed copy straight from me. So I want to like get that going, because I think that's cool to be able to offer signed copies. And then the audiobooks are in progress.
Hey.
So hold tight, everybody.
Awesome. I love me a good audiobook. I'm like, I read so many audiobooks in comparison because I'm always driving or going somewhere.
Yeah.
But I love it.
I know. I'm about to go on a long road trip. And so I was like, okay, I need like 2 audiobooks, couple of podcasts, keep things fun and interesting. Because, music will only do so much. I love music. Mm-hmm. Music is like my bread and butter. I love it so much. But sometimes you just need to hear someone else talking.
That's been me today. I've been listening to The Blade itself. And the narrator is absolutely loving the job. And it's been by far one of my favorite audiobooks, because you can tell this person loves what they're doing. It's been so much fun.
Oh, that's the best. I love that.
So thank you for coming on the podcast. This has been fun. This has been really, really cool. You've done amazing. I feel like there's going to be so much good stuff taken from this episode. And it was delivered so nicely. So great.
Good. Thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun. It's always nice to talk about books and writing and marketing and publishing. I feel like we hit like all the speaking points, right?
Yeah, hit all of the major parts of the process. So for all the listeners, you already know what it is. Peace out and see you next time.
Scribbled notes. Scribbled notes when I wrote these quotes. If I offend, pardon me, there's more of me to grow. Creative in my process, enjoy the show. The will is different when you recognize the different strokes. Different folks, same goals, we all want the most. So when we reach the top, we can enjoy the toast. The type of bread we get is fresh about the bakery. Told them don't play with me. With or without a degree, don't question my intensity. Bravery, similar to agencies that want to see you fold. So just pray for me. Yeah, Einstein with my